If you're doing Bulgarian split squats with the standard technique, chances are you're leaving some serious gains on the table. In this video, I'll show you how a few small tweaks to your setups can make a huge difference to your pulling and squatting strength. I'll also explain how challenging your balance can accelerate your strength gains. I first started doing Bulgarian split squats 8 years ago when I reached a plateau in my back squat and front squat strength. And instead of just taking the off-the-shelf version, I kind of thought about what I wanted to get out of adding this movement to my training and kind of design my own version of the movement. The first thing I thought was that I'd never do front squat or back squat without going below parallel. So it made sense to do the same thing with the Bulgarian split squat. By elevating my front foot on a bumper plate, I was able to get the depth I wanted. By experimenting with this parameter, I found that I felt the most glute activation, more than on any other exercise, if I used a really big stack of plates at the front and forced myself to get into that kind of arse to grass position. So, number one tweak, get below parallel. The obvious caveat here is that I was doing front squat and back squat regularly in Olympic weightlifting, so I was used to squatting very deep. If you're not used to that, you might need to progress gradually from like the standard setup and increase the deficit very gradually. The second tweak relates to stability. So more instability will recruit more muscle fibers and create new neural connections to the muscles. The nervous system doesn't like instability, so it'll actually release neurotransmitters into the brain that will allow for neuroplasticity and allow for new connections to be formed in response to instability. So when you create an unstable setup and you're wobbling, then the brain is going to release these neurotransmitters that are going to allow you to adapt more quickly. So you're recruiting more muscle fibers to stabilize, and your brain is also going to form connection to these muscle fibers more readily because of the instability. Our staple squats with the barbell, so front squat and back squat, are already very stable for two reasons. Firstly, we're standing on two legs, and secondly, the bar makes the load much wider than the base of support. This width creates stability, as is evidenced when you see a tightrope walker holding a long pole for assistance. A Bulgarian split squat is inherently less stable than a front squat or a back squat because you're only standing on one leg instead of two. But if you're relatively strong and athletic, this level of stability might still be too easy to maximize strength gains. The way I thought about it while I was experimenting with the movement was that if I could do 10 reps unbroken on both legs, without wobbling or losing balance, then it was probably too easy. So instead of looking for the most stable setup that would allow me to lift the biggest weights straight off the bat, I created this setup using a resistance band that would challenge my balance. I was still able to crank the weights up as my proficiency in that particular setup grew. Adjusting the tension in the band will make the setup more or less stable. Wrap the band round an extra time if you want more tension and more stability. I also found that using big sets, usually 20 reps on each leg, was another great way to challenge my balance. The big set meant a lot longer standing on one leg, and as the working time increased, so did my heart rate, and the muscles of my leg and my core were getting fatigued, so the movement got harder and harder to control as the set progressed. I also found varying the position of the load was another way to change the movement slightly and introduce another challenge for my balance. I started with dumbbells in the suitcase position, but then I also tried goblet position, front rack, and even overhead. Another reason for doing single leg work is to address muscular imbalances, and this is actually the reason I became obsessed with Bulgarians in the first place. When I was doing front squats and back squats, on my heaviest sets, I'd always feel like my right leg was pushing much more than my left, and I'd see this lateral shift in my hips. In theory, by training one leg at a time, the dominant leg can't compensate for the weaker one. But with the classic Bulgarian setup, it's very easy to push on the bench with the back leg and compensate for a weaker front leg. This could potentially make an imbalance worse instead of better. With the band setup, it's much harder to use the back leg for assistance, forcing the front leg to do all the work. Pistol squats are a great option here too, as the non-working leg isn't in contact with the ground at all, but there is a higher level of skill required to perform them, and for myself personally, At the time, I wouldn't have been able to use the same number of reps or the same amount of load that I would with the Bulgarian. So because I was mainly focused on increasing the strength of my pull and my squat for Olympic weightlifting, I felt the Bulgarian was a better option than the pistol. I hope this video provides you with some ideas so that you can create your own personal Bulgarian split squat setup. And remember, you might not be in the same place that I was when you're starting. So if the standard setup or just maybe a slight elevation of the front foot is enough difficulty for you, if it's a little bit unstable still, even without any load, that might be the right place to start. I've showed a lot of different ways of doing the movement throughout this video, but that's not to say that you should change things up every week. Find something that challenges your balance and is a little bit unstable, and try and keep doing that for 5 or 6 weeks. And when you've really mastered it, then find a new way of introducing some more instability. If you're not ready for the band setup yet, and you've still got your rear foot on a bench, then make sure the bench is the appropriate height for you. I'm about 6'1", and the bench works pretty well for me, but I also coach a lot of females and shorter athletes, and for them, I flip the bench over on its side because this creates the appropriate height for them for the back foot. If you've got an experience with Bulgarian split squats that you'd like to share, or if you've got any feedback on this video, please leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching.